Hey, welcome back. So I'm going to continue discussing Moses, and we'll begin from there today. Moses is an incredible figure in the history of the world. Really, he he's born in a time when Pharaoh and the Egyptians are going after the Israelites' children. It seemed to Pharaoh at the time that there were too many Israelites, and they were beginning to outnumber the Egyptians. And when they were having children, they were having a lot of children, and so their numbers had swollen in the land of Egypt. And whenever that happens, you get this xenophobic idea that perhaps what we can do is kill the infants when they are born. So he tasks the midwives to basically go and grab the children as they're born from their mother's womb and to kill them. This is a form of abortion, and it was something that the Israelites cried out unto God about because they had really started to see that the people were getting slaughtered. Their children were getting slaughtered. So they felt that this was a grave injustice, and it was. So what did they do? They cried out to God. They begged him for mercy. So in that story, you have Moses also being born into that world, into this problem. And so he too was going to be killed as an infant. So his mother didn't want that. So what she did was when he was a small child was she secretly had him, then went down to the river and put him in a basket that would float in the water, and she gently nudged him over towards some Egyptians. Well, she knew what she was doing. She knew who the Egyptians were. And the Egyptian who took him was like the daughter of the Pharaoh. And she was childless. So here, a child is floating down the river and comes into her arms. And she takes him in and raises him as her own. And so Moses is born an Israelite, but is raised as an Egyptian. And so he basically knows the entirety of the Egyptian people. He knows their custom, he knows their ways, and he grows up amongst them. Well, as he does that, he learns and so on. At some point in his life, he sees some injustice happening. And so he sees it an Egyptian hitting an Israelite and treating him poorly. He doesn't like that. So after he sees this guy, he goes up to him. He looks right, he looks left, having not seen anyone around him. He strikes him, and the man dies. So, of course, he flees the area. He has now killed an Egyptian, even though, and he's an Israelite. He's a man of relative power, but the next day he's found out. And the Israelites are like, hey, you're going to get the whole power of Pharaoh to come against us. Who made you ruler over us? So they kind of got mad at him, and he got found out, he got seen, and so they go and basically tell on him. So he flees, and he goes far away, and in going far away, he escapes imminent death. He lives out basically in the wilderness if you will, on a mountain. I think he's in Midian, if I'm not mistaken. He goes there, he marries a woman, and her father was a priest. So he ends up having this relationship with her and prays. He just basically develops a prayer life 40 years away from Egypt. So at some point, God reveals himself to Moses, and in his prayer, which was on Mount Sinai, he is praying and he sees a bush burning. And that burning bush is not consumed by the fire, which is very peculiar, because if there's a fire and the bush is burning, fire generally tends to destroy a bush. So the church is going to see this, and they're going to basically say that the burning bush is the Virgin Mary, and Christ is in her womb, and he speaks to Christ in the womb of the Virgin Mary at the burning bush. So he hears, "You are on holy ground, take off your shoes, for you are on holy ground." So he does that, and or his sandals or whatever they are, and he prays there. And so he sees the Logos of God, Jesus Christ, in the womb of his mother. He speaks to him, and he is basically told and instructed on Mount Sinai to go to Egypt, for the cries of the people are now heard, and God is going to do something about it. So he instructs him to go to Pharaoh, since he speaks Pharaoh's language, to go to Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh that he is to let my people go out and pray, and then they will return. Knowing full well that Pharaoh would not consent to this, nevertheless, God gives Pharaoh opportunity to hear the word, to act upon it, and to allow the people to go out to worship the one true God. Pharaoh does not allow that to happen. So Moses is going to go and say, "Hey, you need to let my people go." And the Pharaoh is going to say no. Moses is going to go back, say, "Let my people go." Pharaoh is going to not do that. And then plagues start. If you don't let my people go, there will be a consequence. So there's locusts, there's frogs, there's 10 plagues that plague Egypt. So Pharaoh, being a brute, if you will, he realizes, I tend to think of him realizing this is an economic problem for him. If he lets the slaves go, then they have to pay the Egyptians for their wages. And so, that's not going to be good for the local economy. So he wants to do what God wants him to do, but he doesn't because he can't, because it would really wreck everything that he's got going on in Egypt. So after 9 plagues, they all constantly get a little bit worse than the other. Moses tells him, "Hey, the 10th one is not to be reckoned with. You're going to lose your firstborn son. And all of the land of Egypt, the firstborn son will be claimed." And Pharaoh says yes, and then he changes his mind. So the angel of death, as the scripture speaks of it, is sent to Moses to Egypt because they will not let the people go. Now, who is going to be taken? The person that will die is the firstborn son of the Egyptians and the Jews, in fact. The Israelites have to do something in order for the angel of death not to come to their homes and to take their firstborn son. So what do? What they have to do is take the blood of a lamb and put it on the post of the door, vertically and horizontally on the doorposts. So you see a cross there. That's the first time you see the cross in this story, at least. So if you put the blood of the lamb on the door in the shape of a cross, then what happens is the angel of death will pass over that house and won't take the life of the firstborn son. So, the Israelites who listened to Moses go and put the blood of the lamb on the doorposts of their homes. And when the time comes, the angel of death goes and he passes over their doors. And in the same vein, he takes the life of the firstborn of all of the land of Egypt, because he did not pass over their doors. So now, Pharaoh's like, get out of here, because he just lost his firstborn son and the heir. Go, leave. So now Moses basically takes all of these Israelites out of Egypt. But Pharaoh is not one that keeps his mind. He changes his mind pretty rapidly, in fact. So he starts to chase after them. He starts to chase after the Israelites. So Moses gets them to the Red Sea. He's being chased after by Pharaoh and all of his chariots and his superior army. And Moses gets to the Red Sea, and he makes the sign of the cross over the Red Sea, and he stretches out his arms like this. And when he does so, the Red Sea parts. And it's as if there were two walls of water in the Red Sea, and the Israelites walk through the Red Sea as if it's dry land, because it is, and they get to the other side. Pharaoh is not far behind them. Moses now crosses the Red Sea himself after all of the people have gone through, and he basically turns around and makes the sign of the cross, and the waters now fall on Pharaoh and all of his army, and Pharaoh is defeated, and the Israelites are now safe on the other side of the Red Sea. This is known as the Exodus. The Exodus. You can find the story in the book of Exodus. So when they cross through the Red Sea, the church is going to see the cross again. Moses holding out his arms. The church is also going to see a baptism, a proverbial baptism of the Israelites as well. So because they cross through water. Now, once they get to the other side, it's not like life is better for the Israelites. In fact, if you ask them, it's worse, because they ate meat. in the land of Egypt. They were slaves, but they had it better. They had like at least a roof over their head. Now they're just wandering in the wilderness, and they wandered there for 40 years. For 40 years. They're going to wander in the wilderness, and they're going to complain a whole bunch to Moses. And Moses is going to basically tell them to be faithful. They're never going to listen to him. He has his brother, Aaron, who has a rod that budded, which is very interesting. And that is how he ends up being known to be the priest, the Levitical priest, and there's a whole book on the Levites and in Leviticus and the priesthood of Aaron. And sometimes I tend to think that God put the Israelites into Egypt so that they could come out of Egypt and worship him in a sense like the Egyptians do. The Egyptians had priestly castes that were very, very close to the Pharaoh. They always made sacrifices unto the Egyptian gods. And one of the Egyptian gods that they had was a calf. So God has revealed himself to Moses. He has revealed himself to the Israelites in the way that the angel of death passed over their home, and he took the firstborn son of all of the Egyptians, their enemies. But he didn't take the firstborn sons of them. So he spared them. Now, Jesus, of course, is the firstborn son. And he is going to become the Paschal lamb, the Passover lamb. He will be the one that is sacrificed. Okay? In this story. So it's not like what happened to the Egyptians, it happened also to Christ. God is so fair in the way that he executes judgment that even his own firstborn son receives the same treatment that the Egyptians received. And this is a very interesting concept. So in the Passover, Jesus becomes the Passover lamb. In the movement out of Egypt into the wilderness, where they will sojourn for 40 years, the people of the Israelites, having seen this great and awesome mystery that really unfolded before their eyes, they didn't seem to understand God's providence, God's mercy, God's compassion for his people. And they began to bemoan him and bemoan Moses in many ways. Then Moses goes up a mountain, and he's up there for like 40 days. 40 seems to be a really prevalent number, and we'll keep seeing that pattern play out in the church as well. 40 days of fasting. So 40 days up in the mountain, on a high mountain. And the people, who are now led by Moses' brother, remember that their life was better in Egypt. And what did they do in Egypt? They worshipped calves. And they basically took all of their jewelry and threw it into a fire. And the gold melted, and they basically made a golden calf and started worshiping it, because Moses was not there. He had left to go up a mountain and pray. And when he was up there praying and talking to God, he was gone for a long time. So they figured he died by this point. And, they weren't allowed to go near the base of the mountain even because Moses said, if you do, you'll die or something like that. So they basically get it in their minds that they have to offer sacrifice to God. So they had to make an image of God, and that image is a golden calf. So they worshiped the golden calf. And Moses comes down from the mountain after 40 days, and what is in his hands is inscribed on 2 stone tablets the words of God, the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. There's 10 of them. Easy to look up. The first 4 refer to God and how to not make images of God, graven images. You shall worship the Lord your God with all, and make no graven images of him. You shall keep the Sabbath day holy, and you shall not take the Lord's name in vain. So the first 4 commandments are about how we are to relate to God. The next 6 are how we are to relate to our neighbors, to our others, people, human beings. So honor your father and mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not bear false image, a false witness. There's 6 of them that you should not do. Honor your father and mother, and then don't do these other things. So Moses comes down and he sees them, and what are they doing? They're breaking the commandments. They have now made an image of God and worshipped this false idol. So he loses his mind. He throws the stone tablet on the floor, and then he ends up going and getting it again from God because it broke or whatever. So this is an interesting pattern that we find in the scriptures. So the Israelites are not really worshiping God the way God intends God to be worshiped by human beings. So they always are making a false image. They're always kind of complaining about what they have to do to appease God. God is desiring righteous people. He wants people to behave properly, to do good. God hates evil. It says over and over and over again that he abhors evil and he seeks people to do righteous things, to behave righteously. Because God is righteous. God is holy. God is divine. So he wants his people to be holy, divine, righteous. They don't always know how to do that. The Israelites certainly don't know how to do that. And that's the whole story of Moses, really, is they're not listening to Moses and they're not following his teachings, his commandments that God has given. And so God is going to kind of keep helping Moses preach to the people. He's going to set him up. He's going to send 70 judges because they all come to him with problems, and he's got to make judgments on all these things. He's got the 10 commandments, but they end up having a lot of commandments, a lot of rules. This is how you need to behave. This is what you need to do. This is what you can't do. This is what you can do. If you do this, this is how you make propitiation for it or rectify this wrong. You know, if someone says 2 people make a claim on this thing, or if someone hurts a person like this, this is what you need to do. What happens when you have a leper? Put him outside of the city or the people. Don't leave him around us. Okay. Then they're worshiping in tents. They're basically told that they have to make a tabernacle so that they could put the rod that Aaron budded into, that they could house the 10 commandments. You know, those kinds of things are going into, and then they were also being fed. So they put manna into this box, this tabernacle, and they had to carry it, but they couldn't touch the box, so they had to carry it with wood. So they had to put the wood through it and carry it on their shoulders. And so 4 men had to carry this tabernacle. and not touch it, because if they touch it, they will die. Things like that. Very strict Levitical priestly rules. Then the priesthood is established at this time, and how they need to worship, who is the line of the Levites, and so on and so forth, and what are the Levites' roles. So Levi is one of the 12 sons of Israel, and so his line is going to basically not be able to inherit anything. They're not going to have any land, any property, but they're going to be well fed because they're priests. So they're basically, all of their needs are met, but they can't own. They're going to get a tithe of everything, and so on and so forth. And they're going to make the best of that to be priests. So Moses is going to basically establish the Israelite community and help them to reconnect with God, but only really through him. He's the only one that's really righteous, among all of them. So there's a story then that now they've obviously worshipped the calf. He destroys the calf. He gets them to worship God again. He establishes this covenant with God and with the people, and the people say Amen, meaning yes, let it be. We'll follow these rules and these teachings that Moses gives us. So they are basically saying we are the Israelites. We are going to follow the commandments of God. We are going to do the right thing always. Okay. And they don't do that. They never do that. That's the functional problem of these people. They're going to complain. God is going to feed them. He's going to give them manna that came from heaven, like this special cakey tasting bread that came from heaven. They didn't even have to bake it. They got to eat of it. And they were given a double portion on the day of the Sabbath day, okay? Because one of the commandments is, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy, meaning don't work on the Sabbath, okay? Keep it holy. Do holy things on the Sabbath, so don't do any work. So even like for the Sabbath day, they had to eat their cake, their manna. They were given a double portion of it for the day before, okay? So even then, God would give them extra so that they would have enough. They would always have enough. But they got tired of that. They wanted meat. They missed meat. They would complain that it was better when we lived in Egypt in slavery and bondage than to be living in freedom here in the wilderness, where we don't have any home, we don't have anything going on for ourselves. Like, this is terrible. So they would constantly complain. And Moses did his best to kind of keep God happy and the people happy. And he would go to God and complain about the complaints of the people. And God would speak to him and say, tell him this, do this. At one point, he strikes a rock. And it's a kind of like a magical thing. And out of the rock comes out water. Okay, comes out water because they were thirsty, or he was thirsty or something. Anyways, God does not like that Moses did this and used his power for magic functionally. So he received a punishment for that. And that punishment was he, along with all the people that he was leading, would never get to see the promised land. Well, they would never get to step foot into the promised land. And Moses was kind of saddened by this, but nevertheless, this is what happens to Moses. And God allows him to see the promised land, and from a mountain called Mount Nebo. And I have been there. It's really kind of neat. Supposedly, from there you can see Jerusalem, so the promised land. You can see Jerusalem from Mount Nebo, and Moses got to lay his eyes on it. Now, this was at the end of his life. This is where he dies, on Mount Nebo. And if you ever go there, there's actually this massive rod that is there, and it's kind of like, has like this serpent around it. And this image comes from one of the stories in the book of Exodus, where they're basically being bit by snakes out in the wilderness. And so Moses is basically told, hey, hold this staff up and tell them to focus on it. And and the snakes won't hurt them anymore. And so this symbol becomes the sign of like on an ambulance. Like this is the snake and the staff is the symbol on the ambulance. Like we talked about noses, the dove with the twig and the beak in its beak of olive wood. That becomes the symbol of peace. This becomes the symbol of the ambulance. Anyways, from the church's perspective, this is a cross of Christ that Moses is holding up. So if you focus on the cross of nothing else will hurt you. Nothing will hurt you is the idea there. So Moses is going to basically do this thing, and he is going to hold up the cross, and they're gonna basically prevent themselves from dying by getting bit by snakes and the snake biting them. Okay, snake again. We saw the snake in the garden, so you see Satan is after them. So this is the story. Aaron, of course, is his brother, and Miriam is his sister. Aaron becomes the priest, basically, functionally, and he's going to model priestly behavior for the people after, of course, after the calf. They're going to get this all right and kind of figure it out. There's the first 5 books of the Old Testament are ascribed to Moses, ascribed to the story that Moses told. You have Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers. If you read those books, you might get a little bored really quickly, especially when you get into the Levitical stuff, because they're basically setting up how the Israelites are going to worship God. And there's going to be an altar. There's going to be an extra place that you're going to go and worship into, and it's going to kind of be like in 3 compartments. And we'll post a video about that. And then that tent, that there is going to be movable tent, and is going to have the holy ark in it, the Ark of the Covenant, that tabernacle that I was speaking of. The ark will be what moves around with them, and this is God kind of leading his people. And they're going to worship God. God is going to be there. And when they build the temple finally, and we'll get there eventually, they're going to have this pattern of this tent, of the movable tent, but now it's going to be a permanent physical structure in Jerusalem. So we'll get there in a little while, but Moses is going to basically tell them, this is what you got to do. This is how you have to do it. When you do this, you're going to build this way. When you do it this way, you're going to build it this way. So there's a lot of instruction that you find in the books of Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers. And so it's really good to read them, but it can really also just take your zeal of reading the Old Testament away from you, because you get really bogged down in the details, and so it might not be the best thing to read Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers. Maybe just stop somewhere. Numbers is going to tell you that there's like millions of Israelites that have come out of Egypt, and then the story is how Joshua is going to take them into the promised land. So Joshua, now Moses is going to die, and the promise basically from God is that no one who has escaped Egypt, they've been wandering in the desert for 40 years because they've been complaining about everything. They're not going to be able to walk into the promised land. And the one who's going to lead them into the promised land is a man named Joshua. Joshua. And Joshua is the like a younger guy, and he's going to become the Moses figure, if you will, and he's going to take them into the promised land, meaning they're going to go into on the other side of the Jordan River, where is Palestine and in Israel in the modern day. So that's the promised land to the Israelites, and that's the promised land that God gave to Abraham and to his seed forever. And again, like I stated before, it's an interesting phrase because they've been gone for 400 years and now 40 years in the wilderness, not possessing the land, and they're going to go into the promised land finally. And what are they going to get there? Well, they're going to basically dispossess the people that are currently living there, because it's not like there's no people there. And Jerusalem is going to be a city that, if you remember, Melchizedek was the king of Salem. So it went back in Abraham's time. So Melchizedek is the king of Salem, Jerusalem, right? So it's that's the place. That place, that land is really ancient, even at the time of Abraham. There's people there. There's always been people there. And they're going to have to dispossess the people of this land. And what is God saying? He's going to lead them to do so. And they're not going to have to do much to inherit the land. They didn't build the houses. They didn't plant the olive trees or the vineyards. They're just going to inherit it. And they're going to basically go and disperse into the land, into different areas. There's going to be the northern tribes and then the southern tribes. And Joshua is going to take them across the Jordan River, okay, into the promised land. Now, the Jordan River, again, baptism of Christ. Joshua and Jesus are the same name phonetically, not in English, but certainly in Hebrew is Yeshua. Okay, it's the same name as Jesus. So Jesus is going to take us into the promised land. Now, the question is, what is the promised land? What is the promised land? And Jesus is really, when he comes, he's going to inform us that the promised land is not necessarily Jerusalem, but the heavenly Jerusalem. So it is Jerusalem on earth, but it's the heavenly Jerusalem in heaven. That's the promised land. Joshua is going to proverbially take them into the promised land so that they could inherit what they did not work for, what they did not labor for, what they did not build, what they did not plant, what they did not grow. That Joshua, Jesus, is going to take us to the promised land, and we are going to live in many mansions. There's going to be food there that we've never eaten, that we didn't plant, that we didn't grow, we didn't cultivate, we didn't do anything for it. God is going to bestow that upon us, and Jesus is going to take us into the real promised land. So this story is a type of the heavenly Jerusalem, the heavenly kingdom, and I think there's a good place to stop. Now that Joshua has taken us into the promised land, perhaps we will pick up from there.